I've set up a Google Classroom here for us, and I've sent you all the code. You have to sign in from your CUNY email address, but let me put the code in the chat room here to get in. And in here, we've got a bunch of stuff that I've populated this with. There's the syllabus, class preferences, house rules, Pro Tools reference guide, Pro Tools shortcuts, licensing Pro Tools on the cloud. I have a playlist of 7 Pro Tools basics videos that are up on YouTube, and then how to get into the Queens College G Suite if you don't know how to do that. But this is the 3rd semester, well, 2nd and a half semester that we've all been online. So I think that you're all pretty savvy at this point with getting onto the Google Apps for Education for Queens College. There's also a playlist here. I make screen captures of the class. The audio that's on the screen capture is much better than the audio from Zoom. So I will put it up on a playlist on my YouTube class, on my YouTube channel. And this is the I don't have anything on there yet because we haven't done a class, but in a few days I'll have this class up on this playlist. So you might want to bookmark that. And then I've got some stuff for today's class here. So I'll be posting assignments here. And I typically have been working with an additional Dropbox for materials. I want to see if I can avoid that this semester and just put everything up on Google Classroom. And we'll see how that goes. So you'll be putting your assignments up here on Google Class, which means you'll need to have access to this. Last semester I had people putting it here, people putting it on Dropbox. I want to sort of try to standardize everything as to being on the Google Classroom for this semester. So if there are any issues with that, let me know. But generally speaking, don't email me an assignment. I get hundreds of emails a day. If you email me an assignment, I won't get it. It's as simple as that. All right. There's a chance I won't get it, but if it's up here in this Google Classroom, I will get it. And it's just a good place for everything to be. Pro Tools for ourselves. So Claudia, I would say get the 1-year student subscription. It's like $99 or something like that. I would say that that's your call, but as a student, until you decide that Pro Tools is the software that you're going to use permanently, because even though I do teach in Pro Tools, I teach you skills that you can port over to any other digital audio workstation. Same techniques in Logic, same techniques in Cubase, Ableton's a little different, but they all have piano editors. They all have audio tracks, MIDI tracks, instrument tracks. They all have aux tracks. They all have sends, buses, all the stuff. All these techniques are the same. The wording and the layout may be a little bit different. So you may find that after the class is over that you might like working in a different piece of software. So I would say just maybe do the student subscription if you don't want to borrow one of our versions of Pro Tools for the semester, signing it out. So a vast majority of you, almost all of you, have had class with me before, but a few of you haven't. I have a very strict and deliberate way that I want all of your projects to be named. And it may seem a little bit controlling. And once you get out of my class, you can do whatever you want. But the reason I do this is that one thing I want you to learn from my classes is about organization and management of digital assets. I've told the story to some of you before, but I've been working for decades using a sequencer in a computer. And, about 11 or 12 years ago, I had been asked to find a project that I'd worked on in let's say, 2006 or 5, because it needed to be revised for some new graphics that were on air. And I had no idea where it was, right? Needless to say, they never called me for another gig. And that was the last time that ever happened to me. So I'm very strict and regimented about how I title things. And the way that it works is this. And I'll make this, let's see. I'll make this really big so it's easy to see. underscore date and your initials, right? And and there's one thing you should know about Pro Tools is that there are what they call illegal characters in Pro Tools, and slashes and backslashes are illegal. So the date would be something like, right? So that is how you will name every project. And I've got that in the house preferences, class preferences right here. Yeah. Now, typically when we have in-person classes, I require everybody to let me know if they're coming to class or not. And the reason being is that if I've got 5 people in a class and I have a topic that I want to teach that's really intense, I may wait a week till everybody's there so that it doesn't have to be taught twice. Online, I'm going to be posting review videos up on YouTube, so it's not so essential. But it would be nice if you aren't able to make a class for you to let me know. All right, so don't worry about you. One thing, but the other thing is that it's just good practice to be in touch with the people that you work with, and you could and you could think of me as your employer, like I'm your client that you're trying to please, so that I'll hire you the next time. That'd be a good way to think about doing this class. All right, so sequencing has been around for a long time, and part of me teaching you how to do this stuff is also me teaching you the history of it. Right? This stuff didn't just come up out of nowhere. And early sequencing started in the 60s, mostly, with the advent of what are called modular synthesizers. And a modular synthesizer is an electronic sound generating machine that came with discrete components that got installed inside of a piece of furniture, a rack, and you would have to use patch cables to make it all work. Now, if you look on my over here, right, this is a modern synthesizer right here. It has knobs and a keyboard on it. It doesn't have patch cables. It doesn't have patch cables like this to talk between the different functions. This is a little bit more, this is a modern synthesizer, but it's old school in that it has all these patch points here to get the different functions to talk to each other for routing and stuff. But before something like this became available, there were modular synths, and there were two. Well, the Moog, Robert Moog, you might have heard of Moog synthesizers, M-O-O-G, and actually, and some of you have heard this before, Dr. Moog was a student at Queens College in the 1950s. He was a physics student. He also took some music classes, and he took music classes with my teacher at Queens College, Professor Berkowitz, because Professor Berkowitz taught at Queens College for like 40 years. And he taught for a while in the 50s and then went off and worked on Broadway as an orchestrator and composer for a decade and television. And then he came back and taught for another 30 or 40 years in the college. But he had Dr. Moog in a few classes, and then Dr. Moog went up to Cornell, upstate New York in the southern tier, and he got his doctorate in physics. But he paid for college by making these kits called theremins, which are an electronic instrument invented by a guy named Theremin, I believe in Russia in like the 1930s or 40s. And basically it was this big box that had like an antenna on it, and you'd put your hands in between, around the antennas, and you'd move it and it would make the sound change. And so he made kits and he sold those. And then after he got his physics degree, he started making synthesizers. So we're going to watch this guy named Benji do this little bit here. So you can hear this? Okay, let's take a listen to this.
Okay, I'm going to show you a sort of basic patch on.
All right, so before he does that, this is a Moog style modular synthesizer. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it is actually a real Moog or if it's one that looks like it. I would imagine that since he has this one over here, but like just down below him, this is an ARP 2500. That's a very rare synthesizer. That since he has that, this is also probably original. And each one of these, you'll notice that there are these areas on here that are all separated by silver bars, right? Each one of these things is a separate, discrete component. And the only way that they talk to each other is by taking patch cables like this and plugging them in. And it uses something called control voltage. So let's watch this demonstration. It's really good.
On the Moog system, because it's a good way of sort of seeing how the signal flow works and explaining what all the different modules do. So first off, we can just listen to an oscillator. What I want to do is send the oscillator through a filter, so we'll listen to the output of the filter, which is here, and then send the oscillator into it. Okay, but what we actually want to do is control the frequency of this. Instead of doing it by hand, we'll use an envelope to do it. So we've got to patch in an envelope. So the input to the envelope, and we're going to send the trigger from the sequencer and send the output of the envelope to the input of the filter control. So when we start the sequencer, it will send out the clock to the envelope, which will then send the envelope to control the filter. And then we can change the decay on this. So what we're going to do now is send the sequencer voltages out to control the frequency of the oscillator, so that it makes a little melody. And before I do that, I'm going to send it out, the output of the voltage from the sequencer, I'm going to send it to a quantizer so that it jumps in perfect semitones rather than just sort of random voltages. So we send the output.
So basically, let me just translate that a little bit for you. The amount or the amount of the voltage changes the pitch, right? So this, I think, is 1 volt per octave. I think that's the way that this one is set up. So every additional volt of electricity, the pitch jumps up an octave. And what the quantizer does is it makes semitones instead of in between pitch frequencies. Interesting, right? Because you don't have to have the pitches that we associate with equal temperament. You could have pitches in between with this kind of a setup, but we're most used to hearing musical intervals and things like that. So this box right here, this is the sequencer, right? And it's got these little red knobs, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 steps to this, and then this is an additional one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like there's 9. But no, up here on the top it says 8. So there's 8 steps here, right? So basically, you set up a tempo and it just cycles through those 8 steps. And all of these knobs adjust different facets of the sound, from the pitch to the duration of the note, if the note's accented. All the notes have the same rhythm, but let's say you've got an 8th note, whether it's a hard 8th note or whether it's a 16th note and a 16th note rest, right? So you can adjust all those parameters here. So he'll get into that a little bit more.
voltage from the sequencer into a quantizer, and then the quantizer to the input of doesn't reach to the input of the sorry, I need a longer lead of the oscillator, which is here. So now when I start it, these are now controlling the pitch of that oscillator. So each time I change the voltage on each of these steps, it'll change.
You can see that blinking light just goes from left to right, and then it goes all the way back to the left and all the way to the right. That's just the cycle that it's doing.
Pitch. Okay, another thing you can do is send the voltage to control the frequency of the filter as well. And then you can just play with all the different parameters, like the decay level, the filter settings. Pulse width. Or the frequency. Cool.
All right, so that's one. Suzanne Ciani she's like, she must be in her 70s now. She was, in the 1970s and 1980s, she was an extremely busy studio musician in Manhattan. She knew how to operate a synthesizer called the Buchla, and Don Buchla was on the East Coast here in the 60s. There was the Moog synthesizer family, and then on the West Coast, this Don Buchla guy invented an analog synthesizer that was very different than the Moog. And Suzanne Ciani was the master of that, and she was in jingles, like advertisement music. She would make synthesized sounds that were musical, and then her biggest famous thing that she did was that she created the sound of carbonated water, like if you pop open a bottle of 7-Up, the fizz sound, that wasn't really the bottle of 7-Up, that was her synthesizer programming that she did. And then in the 1980s, she moved into having her own jingle company. And so at some point, she probably made so much money that she decided to get out of it, and she moved over to the Bay Area, just north of San Francisco, and she's been living there ever since, and putting out new age albums, basically. And then playing piano-based new age and synthesizer albums. But then recently, she started performing with her Buchla synthesizer again. And then about, as you could see, 6 years ago, Moog Music, which is now based in North Carolina, in Asheville, they made a recreation of that synthesizer you just saw, that guy Benji programming. And she went down there and did a performance on it, which combined some live playing and some step sequencing down at the Moog factory in Asheville. Now, that's okay musically, but what's interesting is the way that she has the repeating figure orchestrate itself, and that's done on the sequencer, and then with the figure just repeating over and over again. And then she changes parameters that affect the sound. It's really cool. Now, a couple of things that are really important here, concepts that we will be getting into over the course of the semester, is signal flow, signal routing. How does audio move around inside of a recording environment, right? So this Moog synthesizer here, that's a complete environment. The only thing you need besides that to make sound are speakers that are powered. Everything is right there. And inside of Pro Tools, it's a complete system. You don't really need anything else to create music except a MIDI keyboard. And if you're going to play guitar, you'd need or an instrument, you need a microphone and an audio interface, or just a USB microphone or something to record it. But the software itself is a complete unit. And you see that she's got all those cables patched into there. Well, that whole idea gets ported into Pro Tools, but on a virtual level, right? There are no patch cables, but you have to understand, using buses and other things like that, how to send audio from point A to point B. And that's something that we'll get into as the semester progresses. Now, except for Ableton, all of the current digital audio workstations, which is Logic, Pro Tools, Cubase, Reaper, Performer, and I'm sure GarageBand, and I'm sure there are others that I don't know about. They all follow the pinnacle of recording, of analog recording, which is the 24-track studio. But the greatest advances in technology have taken place in the pursuit of creating popular music. And this was no more evident than what happened in the mid-1960s between the Beach Boys and the Beatles, and the way that Brian Wilson and the team of the four Beatles with Jeff Emerick and George Martin pushed the boundaries of how music was recorded, how music was mixed, how sounds were treated, how microphones were placed, all this stuff. And that's just gone on for the past 60 years to get us to the point where we are now, where inside your phone, you can, with a phone and a USB microphone, you can make incredible sounding recordings. It's not easy. It's a little bit cumbersome. There are people who are important in developing this technology. And in my opinion, Les Paul, the guitarist, he was very important in that. You would be shocked to know that Bing Crosby was also important in recording, because the way that we got our tape recorders was from the pillages of World War II. The Nazis wanted to be able to propagate their propaganda at any point in time that they wanted, anywhere, and have it sound good. So they developed the magnetic tape recording and high-quality recording mediums, microphones, and speaker systems, so that they could pre-record all this garbage and play it out over loudspeakers for crowds anywhere. And after World War II, when they were dividing up the loot, so to speak, the Allies, somehow Bing Crosby ended up investing, the singer, Bing Crosby ended up investing in in some of this technology, because he was doing a weekly syndicated Saturday night show that was live, and he wanted to be able to pre-record it so that he could take some Saturday nights off and go on vacations. So he was really important in the development of that. As far as using this Moog type sequencer and being the antecedents to sequencing as we know it now, the most important musician was the principal songwriter and guitarist for The Who, Pete Townshend.
whole thing about this album is the 2 tracks, Barbara O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again, use a synthesizer in a completely different way than anyone had ever used one before, where it actually provides a rhythm. I mean, it's not just a sound, but it's a rhythm as well. To the best of my knowledge, the first time anybody had used a synthesizer like this,
excuse me.
First of all, nobody I knew anyway knew how to work them. I mean, they were really difficult to program and get to any kind of sound out of.
When I did the sound for Won't Get Fooled Again, I didn't have this bit. This was a bit that I got during the demos. And
that's an ARP 2500 that he has. This gray box above is an ARP 2600. I have one back there. It's an amazing, amazing instrument. But this was the earlier version of it.
So by the time I'd finished the demos, I knew how to work it. But what I did have is a much simpler synthesizer, very much like this one. The one that I actually had, you can see in the photographs, it was with this organ with the EMS synthesizer on the top of it. That was the rig that I used. And basically what I did is took the output of the organ, put it through a filter, which is what they call, it's on sample and hold. You get these random voltages coming out and a voltage sweep. Just a simple kind of synthesizer, normal standard sound, which a lot of people will be familiar with. I suppose I was just sitting there, you know, playing this for hour after hour, you know, and just kind of getting into it, really. Very, very simple chords, obviously, you know, almost kind of naively simple, but on the other hand, you know, the end result is extraordinarily harmonically complex. Giving myself a 32 bar then, you know, playing through the chords. And what's interesting here is what happened to the organ. Remember I'd done a backing track and the organ just suddenly becomes a solo, and I don't really... There's no edits, it's just me playing, you know, and turns into this beautiful little kind of, you know, something I could never have written on paper. But very, very, very disciplined. You know, with counterpoint in there and, you know, bits of fugal stuff. Just brilliant. And I'm just playing and I'm following the music. I'm not writing it, I'm following it as I play, you know. And of course, Who fans will know this because this was the whole centerpiece of the Who show with the lasers and...
What else was interesting about him is that he's one of the first guys that had home studios. And he used to create demos for all their songs for the rest of the band to play. And a lot of times, especially, he started doing that in the mid-'60s. And then by the time the early 70s came around, a lot of the tracks that he would do on his synthesizers at home would just get transferred into the larger studio, and they would play off of those. And a lot of those synthesizer tracks were sequenced. And so he's really important with that. So go to System Preferences, and you'll go to Spotlight and Keyboard Shortcuts, and then you'll select Spotlight here. And in your computer, if you've got a Mac, these are both typically turned on. You would turn them off for Pro Tools. All right. And then if you go to Keyboard, what I like to do, because one of the things I teach you is keyboard shortcuts, is I select this, use the F1, F2 keys as standard function keys. Now, if you do this, all right, so like I was saying, that these keys up here don't work with the icons. They work as function keys. So in order to get them to work, to turn this volume up and down, you have to hold down this FN on your keyboard. And another thing, if you're doing any kind of digital audio workstation, having an extended keyboard is really helpful. You can do it with a laptop keyboard. It's not a problem. But having this numeric keypad enables all sorts of shortcuts that are very helpful. All right. So let's go back here. So when you boot up Pro Tools, you get your dashboard here. And the way that we want to set up the dashboard is you want to make sure that your file type is bwf.wav. That's broadcast wave file. That's just the file format that we're going to use for audio. You want your sample rate to be 44.1 and your bit depth to be 24-bit. And make sure that interleaved is checked. And again, I'm going through this stuff. This will be up on the YouTube, hopefully by Wednesday or so. And then it will start right here that your location is in your documents. Prompt for location. You guys are going to work on your desktop, even though that's not the most optimal way to do this. I'll show you what I want you to do. So I'm going to start a session here. And I'm going to call this test and then today's date and my initials. And what I want you to do is on your desktop, you'll create a folder and you'll just simply title it Audio MIDI 1. Right, and all your classwork will go in there. So I'm going to create this, and then it's going to prompt me for location. Now, for you guys, it'll probably look something like this. If you click on this little downward-facing triangle here, it will open this up, and then you just simply navigate to your desktop and to your new folder, and you save it there. Now, before we look at this here, I'm going to hide this. I want to talk to you about folder structure and how Pro Tools sets up folder structure. So this is the session that I just created. So a Pro Tools project is called a session. Now, this folder here is the session folder. It is the file cabinet or the large container that all the assets required to run your session are stored in. And Pro Tools does that automatically. So right now, let's take a look in here. And you'll see that there are a bunch of subfolders, right? Pro Tools creates all these at the beginning of the session. But when you close out the session, only the folders that have data inside of them will remain. The other ones will disappear. For right now, the really important thing for you to remember is that this is your Pro Tools session file. All right, so I want you to right now let's get this straight, because this is a problem for the past 9 years that some students, it takes them 10 weeks to understand this. So, and I've been teaching this for 9 years. So session folder, session file. When you upload your Pro Tools homework assignments, you will be uploading a zipped version of the session folder, not the session file. Let me go over that again. This is the Pro Tools session folder, and this is the Pro Tools session file. This contains all the data of your session, and it references assets that are stored in these subfolders. They are all stored inside of the session folder, so that if you send me just this and you've got data in here, I don't have that data on my computer, so I can't run your session. Why is that important aside from homework? Well, if you're collaborating online with somebody, which is a big part of what's happening now, being able to send things back and forth over the internet is very important. So I'm going to be going over this again, but just remember, you've got the session folder, which is the parent file cabinet or container that has all the assets that the Pro Tools session file, which is this .ptx, that's the extension on this, that this file needs to run. Okay. I'm not used to talking for an hour and a half straight yet, or an hour straight. I have to build up my endurance. Now, this is the edit window. Pro Tools also has a mix window right here. Oops, let me make that a little smaller before I drag it down. For our class, we're not going to work in this window right now. So let's not worry about this. I only want to show you things that you need to know to get started. So this is broken up into several areas. This top level here, this is the toolbar. This area here, right here, I just made gray. This is the ruler area right here. And this is the edit page, right? So this is the edit window. And then right here, this is the arrange or edit page. Each sequencer has a different nomenclature for that. Then you've got lists over here. We'll get to that in a minute. But let's just start at the top with the toolbar. Now, everywhere on Pro Tools that you see a triangle or a circle with a downward facing triangle or a line with a downward facing arrow, if you click on that, that means that there's additional functionality to be found or additional submenus underneath. So the toolbar is customizable. Now, if you've got an iMac at home or a computer with a large screen, you can see a lot of data. If you've got a 13-inch laptop, it's kind of difficult. So you'll want to be able to customize this and change it depending upon what you're doing. And that can be found over here. So for our class right now, we won't need the zoom controls. We won't need synchronization. We do need output meters. We do need MIDI controls. You might use the transport if you can't figure out how to get it to start recording. You can always do it manually, but I want you to use key commands. So let's just leave this up right now. So you'll see that much less. Right. This is all the stuff up on the toolbar. It takes up a lot of space. That wouldn't fit on a laptop very well. So we don't need the zoom controls for now, the synchronization, the Ableton link. If you want to have the transport, just have the regular transport, not the expanded transport. And MIDI input display. Yeah, you can leave that on. That might be helpful. So let's go from left to right and talk about things. And what I'm going to only talk about right now are the aspects of the toolbar that you need to know today or to get started. If I used a textbook, they would go over every function here, and you get so bogged down in trying to remember all that stuff, you couldn't get started, right? When to just get started, you only need to know a few of the things that are here. So on the far left-hand corner, right, these are our edit selectors. You've got 4 edit modes: shuffle, slip, spot, and grid. For the beginning of this class until maybe the 5 or 6 weeks in, you want to set this onto the grid and make sure that the grid is blue, because if you click on it again, it becomes purple, and that's the relative grid, and that's a little bit more advanced feature that I don't want to talk about today. So make sure that that's blue and just set for grid. All right, these are some edit tools here, and the only ones that we need to concern ourselves with is this one here, the trim tool, and notice the selector tool, the grabber, and the pencil. So I didn't do the magnifying glass or the speaker. Just these 3 and this one. And we'll go over that. We'll go over that shortly. All right. So trim tool, selector, grabber, and pencil. Now you'll notice that these guys have some triangles. I don't know if you'll be able to see that on your laptop screens, but they've got tiny triangles underneath, which means they've got extra functions. You just want to keep it on the top one, right? You always want to make sure it's on the top one. This right here is our counter. It lets us know where we are in the session, and it counts time. Now, there are many ways to count time, but since we are doing music, we're going to count time in bars and beats. So there's a downward facing triangle here that you click on, and then you select bars and beats, right? You can do minutes and seconds, which is what yours will default to. You could do time code, which is great for film scoring. You could do feet and frames, which is another film reference, and samples, which I've never used. And then right here, so that's the counter. So you're going to set it to bars and beats. And we're going to talk about how Pro Tools and every sequencer counts bars and beats. Not today, but soon. And then over here, we've got our grid. Now, we're going to make sure that that's turned on by making sure that this is light lit to that lime green color. And you could change the resolution of the grid right here, right? These are all the different note values, and you can make it a dotted note or a triplet. So for right now, let's just leave it at a half note. That's fine. This is our transport. This is record, this is play, and this is stop. Those are the only ones you need to know on the transport for right now. And I'd actually like it if you didn't use the transport, if you used the computer keyboard. And this is our MIDI tools. I think that's what it's called. So the MIDI tools that are important to us right here is the metronome, which is your click track, and the conductor track. So make sure that those are both blue. Okay, so that's everything with the toolbar. Again, I'm making a video of this, and I have this up on that playlist on YouTube that's linked in our class, Google Classroom. Now, another thing that we should do is we should go to our setup and go all the way down to the bottom where it says Preferences. And we're going to click on that. And this is Pro Tools Preferences. And it has here a bunch of tabs. So you could do preferences with different functions, right? And we're going to talk about display. So the first thing that we want to talk about is we are going to organize our plugin menus by category and manufacturer. And then over here, this is very important, our color coding. Always display marker colors. MIDI note color shows velocity. Default track color coding, tracks and MIDI channels, and default clip color coding, track colors. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take a screenshot of this. And I'm going to pop this in the chat. Whoops, that went to Chris. Let me send that to everyone. Okay, so you can download that and refer to that. But again, this is all stuff that's referenced in those setup videos on YouTube, and you'll have it here to refer to. And then the other one is if you go to MIDI, the MIDI tab, click and make sure this is set up. Automatically create click track in new sessions. This way, every time you open up your session, there'll be a click track. And it's good to know how to do that because sometimes that gets corrupt, and for some reason you'll open up a new session and there's no click track. To add the click track, it's very easy after the fact. Just go to track and it's the bottom selection here. But we'll get to that. I'm going to rush through that because that's not important right at this moment. Okay. Now, this next area here is the rulers. And rulers measure things. Well, rulers run things if you're a king or something like that, or a despot. But rulers measure things. So I'm going to zoom in. And you notice here, we've got bars and beats, right? We have samples. We don't need to see samples. So the way you can customize this, again, to claim as much screen space as you can to see the session, is you click here and you turn the sample. Oh, well, you'll have to just click here and unselect samples. So and then you've got your tempo right here, your time signature, your meter, and your key. We don't really need to see the key right now, so we're going to turn that off. So the only ones that we need to see are, for today and for the first part of our class, are bars and beats, tempo, meter, and markers. I'm going to get into keys because there's also a chord chart that you can make in Pro Tools that shows up on the timeline. I'm going to show you how to do that in probably about six weeks or so, but let's get through the basics. So this is how you set up your rulers. And before we go any further, there is on the right-hand side right here, keyboard focus it's called. There's a little rectangle with the letter A and then catty corner from it, the letter Z. It will be gray when you turn on Pro Tools. Click on that and make it amber. Now, once you've done this setup, every time you open up a Pro Tools session, it should, in theory, boot up with this setup, right? It might change if you send it to me and I send it back to you to work on. But just as long as you're working in your own home Pro Tools session, they'll all open up like this once you get it set up. All right. So in our rulers, we only need to see bars and beats, tempo, meter, and markers. Now, this is where all our tracks are going to be, down in this area here. So we've got a click track now. And we can click right here at this triangle here to determine and define what we're going to see in the edit window view. So what we're going to use is instruments, inserts, and we don't need to see I/O right now unless you're working on a larger computer. Then you can put I/O. But you don't need to see I/O for right now. Now, let's leave it on. Let's leave it on. There might be benefits to that. Okay. Now, we want to create a track and play some MIDI back. Record MIDI and play back some MIDI. Now, what you guys should do, and give me 1 second. Let me get a prop. All right, so I've got a tiny little MIDI keyboard here. This is more than sufficient to do with classwork. You don't have to have a big fancy MIDI keyboard. On the back of this, there are a bunch of, here, let's do this. On the back of this, there are a lot of ports, right? You notice right over here, there's a little mini USB cable. It will come, and you plug the cable into there, and then you plug that into a USB out input on your computer, and this will get powered by the voltage coming out of the USB. And this is what's called class compliant, which most MIDI keyboards these days are, meaning that you plug it in and it will play. It will send MIDI, but the connection is you plug the USB in here, and you plug the other end of the cable into your computer. And then this will all light up and it will be sending MIDI back and forth. All right, so let's go to this view here. So key commands. Key commands are a very important aspect to doing this study. All right. So to create a new track, you're going to go to key command will be Command, Shift, and the letter N like Nancy. And it brings up this dialog. New tracks. We are always going to be working with stereo tracks for the first part of this semester. Once we start doing audio in the second half of the semester, we'll be using mono tracks. But for right now, make sure that you select stereo. I can't tell you how often students send mono instrument tracks, and it takes me a minute to wonder why it sounds so bad. So you're going to click here. So you've got stereo, and you're going to click here, and you're going to create an instrument track. And I'm going to call this piano. And I'm going to create that. Now, how do you make sound? Well, what you need to do is you need to insert a plug-in instrument into the insert column here. And the way you do that is you go to the top slot, click on that, you go to multi-channel plug-in, and you go to instrument. Now, I've got tons of instruments, right? So I'm just going to go right here to Air Music Technology because there's less. And you're going to select at the beginning Mini Grand. Now, if you did it in the instrument, right, it's alphabetical, Mini Grand. Give me 1 second here. All right. And this brings up this, what's called a VI, or a virtual instrument, or a plug-in instrument. And this is called the GUI. Anybody venture a guess on what GUI stands for?
Graphical user interface.
Correctamundo. Thank you. So you'll notice that there's a bunch of controls here, and they all affect the sound. Also, up here, and almost every Pro Tools plugin has this, there's something called preset. And if you click on this, it brings up a bunch of presets. So I'm going to select Real Piano. And then it adjusts some of these parameters to create a real piano as opposed to a honky-tonk piano or an ambient piano, just a nice real piano. Now, to record enable this, you go over here and you click on this track record enable, and then it will blink. So now if I play my MIDI keyboard, I should hear some sound. Right? Okay. Everybody can hear the sound from the piano, is that true? Just double checking that it's coming out. All right, good. Now, you don't need to have this open when you're recording. So if you click on this amber button right here, it'll close up. To record, the first thing you need to do is figure out your tempo. And how do you change tempo in Pro Tools? Very easy. I'm going to hit the return key, okay? And you notice my counter goes back to bar 1, beat 1. So if I click here, I'm on bar 4. If I want to go back to the beginning, I hit the return key, and it goes back to measure 1. I want to play something that's not too fast, not too slow. I want to figure out a tempo. How do you do that? Well, right here, this is your tempo ruler, and you'll notice that there's a little plus sign here. And you notice that it says Add Tempo Change. So if I click on this, another window comes in giving me tempo change, right? Now, you can type in a number. So let's say I wanted to do 84 beats a minute. I would just type that in, hit enter. And then you'll notice that it says right here 84 beats a minute. And also up here it says 84 beats a minute. Make sure that your conductor track is blue. And I'll go over that in a minute. But just make sure that your conductor track is enabled. Now, what if I don't know my tempo, but I've got a feel in my head of a tempo? Bum, da, da, dum, bum, bum, ba, da, dum, bum. I start tapping on the letter T key on my computer keyboard. Bum, chick, bum, chick, bum. And then it gives me my tempo, which is 74. All right? So I used to teach this thing called Wait Note MIDI, but that has gotten incredibly buggy in Pro Tools. So what I do is now teach count off. And so that means you click this right here, and you could change the count off by double clicking on it. Right, I double click on where it says 1 bar, and you can make that 1 bar or 2 bars or however many bars you want. And while we have this window open, the click count off options, make sure that it is set so that the click track only plays back during record. You don't want the click track to play when you're playing things back. It really is obnoxious. So you set it up so that it only plays during record. So I'm going to set this up to 1 bar. And now to start recording, there are multiple ways to get Pro Tools to start to record. You can do the way that is the most pedantic and really cumbersome by clicking on the record button up here, the record enable button up here. But the better way is that there are 2 key commands you can use, right? The one key command is Command spacebar, and you see it's counting off. Or what I like to do is just the number 3 on the numeric keypad. All right, if you've only got a laptop, and this is why we turn Spotlight off, because if you don't turn Spotlight off when you do this, Spotlight will show up and it takes over Pro Tools. So make sure that your Spotlight is off. So I'll do it this way because most of you have laptops and that's the way you'll be doing it. So I'm going to click this and 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I start playing something. So I'm just going to make something up very simple. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's as simple as that. All right? You've recorded your first basic track in Pro Tools. Now, if you want to do that again, you can do Command Z and it undoes what you do. But you can just redo it. It will record over that. Now, it didn't actually get rid of it. It just recorded over that. Pro Tools has still kept that data. It's in the clips list, which I'll get to at another point. So you've recorded your first track. Very simple. Now, for those of you that can't play keyboards really well, and keyboards are really having a basic understanding of how to play keyboards is very, very important in this subject. But you can get through this class without it. I had a student who didn't know anything about music except that he loved it, and I got him through the class. That was a year and a half ago. He did very well. Maybe you just want to play 5 notes, right? 2, 3, 4. Again, you've recorded something. That's great. Now, there's one trick I want to show you is what if that tempo is, even at that moderate tempo, it's too fast for you? What I like to teach students to do is to set up a preset where you've got, with one click, something that's much slower and that you could play your part in. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say I wanted to play something like this. But I can't play it that fast. I can only play it right? Okay. If you turn off the conductor track, it defaults to a tempo of 120. Let's say I type in 50. Now it's going to play back slower. Afterwards, I can click on the conductor track, and with one click, I'm back to my original tempo. Not cheating. You basically want to get the information into the computer and then edit it to create a performance. You want to use any means possible. I have a friend of mine who once told me about a very famous jazz guitarist who he was recording, who was playing something that was too fast on the guitar for him to play on the guitar. So they slowed the whole session down 20 beats a minute, and he recorded it, and then they sped it back up into Pro Tools. So even the professionals do that. So I've got this now set to 50 BPM. And as this click track is going on, I'm hearing those eighth notes in my head. Da, da, the subdivisions. Da, 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 da. And then we go back, turn our conductor back on. Now, I've got some rhythmic stuff there that's not exactly right. We can fix that. Now, we're going to go over one more thing today. It's been a lot. How do you record a second track? Well, Command-Shift-N. And we're going to add a stereo instrument track. And we're going to call this, just for now, to keep things simple, Piano 2. And notice if I turn the... we need to put Mini Grand in there. So you could do one of two things. You can either call up Mini Grand here, right, going through this. Or you can hold the Option key down, click and drag this right into this slot. You know, drag the coin right into the slot. That's a Chuck Berry song. Okay, so if I click here now, you'll notice that it is only recording on this track. This one is no longer record enabled. Now, that's with MIDI. When you're working with audio tracks, they always stay record enabled unless you click on them and unrecording them. Yeah, there'll be something due, Kevin. Email me to get the assignment. All right. So let's say I want to record a second part for this. Something that's like lower. That's not in the screen. But so I'll do this. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and... Oh, so I made a mistake. All right, I made a mistake. Well, the first part was pretty good, but I made a mistake right in this area here. So what I'm going to do is hit the return key and just go over it again. 2, 3, 4. And it's as simple as that. And always Command S, save, 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 save. Always save every few minutes, save. Don't, because it's computers crash. All right, so before we go any further, let me take the temperature of the room. So how many of you are set up to start working right now? Hello?
Yes, I am.
So like, right, just type in the chat room how many people are set ready to start working right now. Okay. All right. So all of you, so Andrew Lipton, are you a music major? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. So do you play keyboards? Just
I just learned very rudiments last semester.
All right. Okay. So that's good to know. Yes, Salita, you're good to go. All right. So everybody who's not ready to go yet, try to get ready this week. Don't fall behind. What ended up happening last semester was that 4 students in Recording Studio Fundamentals got behind, and 3 of them never caught up and ended up taking incompletes for the semester, and they haven't even done anything to make up over the break. So I don't want that to happen. I want everybody to learn. I'll do it. We'll work hard to get this. This is not the ideal learning situation. It's much better if we're in the classroom and I can teach this stuff and then walk. I like to walk around to each station and give you like 5 minutes of private instruction during the class. I like doing that to be able to see what you're doing. It's much better. But I want you all to get through this stuff. So try to get that stuff set up this week. Get in touch with Justin on that list I sent out the links for. And what your assignment for next week will be to write 100-word essay reviewing the Pro Tools aspects of what we learned in class today. Not about the sequencer stuff, the history stuff, but basically all the stuff that we just went over in class. The difference between a session file and a session folder, what's on the toolbar, what's on the rulers, how do you instantiate a track, how do you do the preferences setup. Just write me a nice summary of everything. Again, I'm going to post the review video up on that YouTube playlist, so you'll be able to go back over it if you haven't been taking notes. And everybody else, we're going to have some fun. So give me 1 second here to get some, because a lot of you are graduate students that are ready. So let me do this. I'm going to pop these into the chat room now, and then I will put them up in on the Google Classroom. Those of you that took class with me last semester and have the sign in for the Dropbox, I've got a new Audio MIDI 1 folder, and it's in class 2, 3. Oh, only the one of them downloaded. Give me a break. All right. So those of you that are undergraduates that aren't music majors that are ready, sequence something on 2 tracks like this with 2 piano sounds, and it can be anything. I just want you to just get Pro Tools open, get it running, get the stuff in, and get going. So it could even be something like this. And then your left hand, right? It could be even something as simple as this. Well, maybe not that simple. So those of you that are undergraduates that are set up to go, that aren't music majors, something simple like that, a little bit longer. It can be, anything. It could be maybe a melody that you know of, a pop song you like with a second part put into it. But just do something, right? Just get something going. And what you're going to do is you're going to save it. And then to end the session, the way that you close a session is you don't quit. You do Command, Shift, and the letter W, right? And that closes the Pro Tools session down without quitting Pro Tools. So I've got that on my desktop in my Audio MIDI 1 folder. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your project that and you're going to right click on it and you're going to compress that. So remember, we're doing the session folder. Oh, hold on a second. My fault. Let me get rid of this. Okay, so we're here. I'm in my Audio MIDI 1 folder that we created on the desktop. I'm going to right-click on this, which is our session folder. We're not going to open it up. We're not going to compress this. We're going to compress the folder. And we're going to right-click, and we're going to compress that. And this is the part that you're going to upload to the Google Classroom. All right? Now, all of you undergraduates understand that? So there's 2 levels of assignments. For those of you that aren't ready, you're going to work on getting ready for this week. You're going to work on getting ready for this week. Those of you that are ready, that are undergraduates, that are not music majors, you're going to just sequence something, 8 bars of something. All right. This way I can see that you've got everything working and you're doing two instruments. Very simple. Those of you that are music majors, graduate students that are ready to go. All right. So here we've got 3 pieces by Bartok. All right. So those of you that are undergraduate music majors, or those of you that are a little bit better than at keyboard than somebody with very little, and this is not a pejorative, but Andrew Lipton he's learning keyboards, right? But somebody that might have a little bit more skills, but it's not a music major, you can sequence this Bartok piece right here, number 10. And you're going to do 2 tracks of it. Left hand and another track for your right hand. Number 10. Or number 17, contrary motion. And you can do it 1 hand at a time. All right, these are very easy. And we're going to make arrangements from these, but so this is your first choice. You got those 2 choices. The rest of you, you're going to sequence this. Now, Paul, I know you already did this, but you're going to do it again. And we'll just, it's always good to do it again. All right, now let's take a look at this. You're going to do this on 2 tracks, 2 piano tracks. And then eventually I'm going to show you how to expand this out into an arrangement. Now, a couple of things about this that we'll learn. It's got multiple key signatures. So it starts out in 3/4, and then it goes to 2/4, back to 3/4, 2/4, 3/4, 2/4, 3/4, right? So we're going to learn how to change time signatures. And the other thing is that it's in 4 voices. What do I mean by that? Well, here, there's only 2 notes playing at one time. And then here on beat 2, we have a D, an octave higher a D, and then a G. Three notes playing, right? And then here, 3 notes playing. And then right here, you notice there's 4 voices playing. So there's either 1 or 2 voices in each part playing at the same time. So in other words, there's 1 voice in the first violin, or there's 2 voices in the first violin. There's never 3 voices in the first violin. Same with the second violin. Now, those of you that are music majors, take a look at this and see what you can tell me. And it's good that Kevin's not here because he would have the answer for this very quickly. What are these second notes in the first violin part? Where are they played on the violin? Anybody venture a guess?
Open strings.
The strings.
Oh, yes. It's so nice to have graduate students. Yes, they're played on open strings. There are 4 open strings on a violin. They're G, D, A, and E. And so that's one thing these are easy duets that Bartók is using. And so basically on a violin, these would be open strings. Drones. Yes, Alan. They are drones. And the same thing with the left hand, or the second part, right? This is an open G. It's played on the lowest pitched string, and then this would be played on the second string. Okay, so let me show you how I want you to set this up. So Command-Shift-N, right? Bartók, V duet. Today is 2-1-21, and my initials, but you put your initials on it. Let me just make sure that I don't have, last semester I had 2 people with the same initials. And we seem to be good this semester. Okay. And I'm going to save this in my folder. Now, just so that you know, the best way to work is not on your desktop, right? If you look here on my computer, I've got 15 million hard drives. I have a separate drive that just has all my projects in it. But you guys, for what we're doing in class, you can work on your desktop. It's fine. Okay, so let's see if I can do this so that we can see everything. So I'm going to lose myself. You don't need to see me. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And let me make this a little bit smaller so I get everything on one screen. Okay, so we're in 3/4, right? So we click on the plus sign right here where the meter is, and we're going to type in the meter, 3/4. Okay, and then, so before we do any recording work, we're going to set up the structure and the framework of this piece before we do any recording, right? Just get everything in there. All right, and the tempo is 80. Okay, so now I'm just going to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So on bar 6, we've got a measure of 2/4. Now, let me just show you something. Right here, I talked about this a little bit. We've got the A and the Z turned on, so that's amber. So what that does is that lets me use the R key and the T key to zoom in and out. That's very helpful. R and T, those are really good key commands. So I zoomed in a little bit, but what we're going to do is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm just going to enter 6 here, and then a new meter, 2, 4. And then measure 7 is 3, 4. Eight, 9, 10 is 2, 4. Whoops. Well, you can also type it in here, right? Oh, that's tempo change. That's not what I want. Excuse me. Meter, 2, 4. And then 11 is 3, 4. Right, so you're getting all your framework set up for the whole piece. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 is 2, 4. 19 is 3, 4. Oops. 19 is 3, 4. 20, 21, 22 is 2, 4. 23 is 3, 4, and all the way to the end. So 23 is, all right, great. So we're all set up. We're going to do Command-Shift-N, one stereo instrument track. We're going to call this Piano 1. And then we'll put our mini grand in here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this name. I want to get you guys started right away with some of these quick shortcuts. Right click here and another menu comes up. And then you go all the way down to duplicate and make sure that everything is checked here. That's fine. And then just rename this Piano 2. So you double click right here and this other menu pops up. Piano 2. And then the last thing I want you, and then you start working, right? You just start sequencing each hand separately. Now, what I would suggest you do is don't try to sight read through the whole thing, right? And it would be really helpful if you had like a little pad, like an iPad or something like that, or you could print this out so you could see it. But we're going to have to work like this. It's a little difficult. Let me close this. There we go. That's a little hard for you guys to see, but I can read that. All right. So I've got my count off set to 1 bar. And I record enable this instrument here. And bum, 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 right? Oh, hold on. Make sure you hit the return. And let me, okay. So for you guys, it's probably Command Spacebar. For me, it's the number 3. 2, 3, 4. Whoops, see? I counted 4, but we're in 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, stop. Zoom in, and I'm going to pick it up from measure 3, right? So I just put I make sure that I've got my selector checked here, and then I can click in here in the ruler area, or I can just type in measure 3, and we got 1 bar count off, and then we're going to pick it up at measure 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I made a mistake. I'm going to go over that again. 2, 3. Off. Right? And then I would just go through the whole song like that and just get the right hand down. Just get it in there. It doesn't have to be completely perfectly accurate 100%. I'm going to show you how to start doing that next week. But try to get as much of this done as possible. Okay, and then now you do the left hand, right? 1, 2, 3. Up, hit the return key. See, you got to start at measure 1. Right? If you have to go 1 or 2 bars at a time, it's not a problem. You basically just want to get the information into the computer, and then we're going to craft an orchestration from this. And you'll have freedom to do whatever kind of an orchestration you want. You don't have to have it be specifically a classical orchestration. You can do whatever you want to it, but we'll get to that. But you need to get the information in there. You need to get everything sounding good. We're going to work on editing note lengths, note rhythms, the velocities of notes so that we get a nice melodic dynamics and nice melodic contour to the melodies. And we're going to start using other instruments besides the piano. Yes, Jinhee. Yes, the recorded review video will be better. Yes. So I think that's quite a bit for today. I think we're going to stop it here. So now, again, you guys are going to close out of this. Hold on, let's do this. Right? Command Shift. You're going to save when you're done. Command Shift W. And then you go here. And we've got our Bartok, and you are going to take the folder, all right? Not the session file, but the session folder, and compress that. And this is what you're going to upload to Google Classroom.